Practitioners, welcome back to this thing of ours where this concept called game is both an art as well as a science. I'm your host, Neil K. Marcellus, and these are the Chronicles of Gameology. Knowledge of the art is the science, and application of the art is the art, and that's checkmate. Speaking of science, it's a saying that goes, neurons that fires together, wires together. Basically, as most of you already know, neurons are nerve cells that communicates to every aspect of our body. So this phrase that goes, neurons that fires together, wires together, what this means from a street philosopher's perspective is when you consciously decide to make a choice to change and to choose to upgrade to a new thought or behavior, neurons firing together with continuous repetition has the capacity to rewrite the neural pathways of our brain wired together, which can create a transformation and a different course of action. More times than not, we are confronted with the options on this chessboard to either remain in a state of dread or to evolve. If you stop at the former, which is the state of being in dread, then you would change nothing. But if you embrace the latter, which is the options to evolve and upgrade, then you can change everything. What I just got through stating pivots and latches onto the fact whether an individual is in a disposition where they are stagnant or a disposition where they can flow, surrounding the fortification and capacity of their mental prowess and dexterity. So for instance, when a man's mind is stagnant and sluggish, this makes him vulnerable and wide open to be ear spanked by a shiesty female. You see, being street savvy is a requirement to practice this philosophy. But when one is street savvy, one is clued in on the techniques and treacherous ways of someone practicing shiestyism. Shiestyism is what you would call the dark side of the force, as it pertains to this concept called game, to use an analogy from Star Wars. But let me add some clarity about the statement surrounding this concept referred to as the dark side, and to say that the concept of darkness is relative when it comes to this philosophy called game, because darkness can apply to hidden knowledge and wisdom as well. But in this context, it is meant as something negative and unfavorable. With that being said, when a man's mind is stagnant and sluggish, this opens them up to be ear spanked by a shiesty female, particularly one who would bounce back and forth throughout different positions that makes up the shiesty gang of six portrayed currently on this image. I will explain here momentarily on how all of this comes together. But seasoned OGs who taught me this street philosophy and craft laced me up that when a man is ear spanked by a shiesty female, then that man will become more manageable and have a better disposition where he is quick to acquiesce and submit to that woman's instructions. You see, in a lot of relationships, and by the way, from a gameologist's perspective, there are 6 kinds of relationships. But in a lot of relationships, it's women who exclusively takes up the mantle as head honcho in the entanglement between the man she is fucking with and her. Ear spanking is the process where a woman would take charge and subjugate the man whom she is dealing with, and would fall in pocket and take up 2 duties. 1 as the shyster, and number 2 as the criticizer, as indicated on this image, showcasing the shiesty gang of 6 as it is referred to from a street perspective. The shyster position offers her the conniving social engineering techniques to manipulate and mandate what's good or wrong and what's proper or improper within the relationship. And the criticizer position gives her the conniving and social engineering techniques to control a man's shaping factor, which indirectly oversees his standards of behavior. I went over the significance of one shaping factor in my last episode. Here's the link. Check it out once you get through viewing this episode. Now here's the thing. Shiestyism is considered the dark side of the force, like I said earlier, and both men and women can take part in exhibiting shiesty behavior. The vernacular that is commonly used to signify when someone is being shiesty is to say, this person is trying to run game. And take note, The term game in this context is implied with a lowercase letter g. As for the philosophy of game, it is always presented with a uppercase letter G. But swinging back to the concept of shysterism, basically it is a cat and mouse interplay where conniving social engineering techniques is dished out to those who are oblivious to the fact that they are being brainwashed. And as I stated at the beginning of this episode, it all comes down to one choosing to stay in a condition of dread or take part upon themselves and decide to flow and participate in their own evolution. And this infliction of being ear spanked as a result of being stagnant is just one of numerous calamities that can happen to an individual. Now, let me clarify and set the record so there won't be no misunderstanding. I do not prescribe and give credence to the theory of evolution, spearheaded and made popular by Charles Darwin. I view it as some reductionist bullshit and consider the theory to be shady and highly speculative. Like a famous author once said, the theory of evolution has more cracks and fractures embedded into it than a dam made out of Swiss cheese. Because full show for real. But being a practicing gameologist, you are always thinking in a pragmatic manner. So accordingly, Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution, but he superimposed a similarity between apes and humans. He concluded that humans came from apes. Since this street philosophy requires a practitioner to participate in out-of-the-box type of thinking, my take is, why couldn't the opposite and the reversal of how he saw it, Charles Darwin that is, be true as well? Meaning, how about instead of humans coming from apes, how about some humans left civilization and start living in the forest and thereby develop a body or lifestyle suited to jungle life? Instead of considering humans as some type of ape, we could think of apes as uncivilized humans. Why couldn't that be the case? Also, Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution, it boils down to that all life, or only life that is adapted to the environment, can survive. This is natural selection plus survival of the fittest. Also, mutations and genetics. This is the concoction that makes up the Charles Darwin theory. If this is the case, let's rationalize this out. So, say for instance, when it comes to mutations, individuals usually get sick. Let's assume that a genetic abnormality causes a tumor in a person's body. Does that tumor help that individual adapt to their environment and live? The answer is hell no. But I digress. There is a more authentic and highly conceptual view of evolution that's older and that stretches back thousands and thousands of years before any Charles Darwin or his theory of evolution ever came about, which is a concept referred to as self-evolution, a process of consistent progression that takes place inside and outside of our existence. We are evolving from the very moment that we are born, and everything that surrounds us evolves accordingly to its internal mandate. Self-evolution is why, for example, it is said that we cannot enter the same river twice. We evolve from being reckless to being regal, from incompleteness to wholeness. Now, let me divulge on exactly the reason so many are wide open to be misused and abused by the dark side of the force, which is shysterism, and why so many are restricted on using and implementing any of this philosophy referred to as the concept called game. Circling back as to what I've been emphasizing from the beginning of this episode, and that is, an individual is either in a disposition where they are stagnant or a disposition where they can flow, surrounding the fortifications and capacity of their mental prowess and dexterity. Nikola Tesla, the famous inventor and out-of-the-box thinker, who is directly responsible for many breakthrough technologies that we take advantage today, gave an enormous clue as to why so many are stagnant and can't utilize the flow of their mental prowess and mental dexterity. And this enormous clue was divulged when he said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Now put a mental stinky note into what I just stated, because I'm going to tie it back into this concept of self-evolution. And remember, I said that self-evolution stretches back thousands of years before any Charles Darwin or his theory of evolution ever came about. But look no further as to what Nikola Tesla was alluding to, and how the secret he mentioned is basically hiding in plain sight. And so this secret has to do with what I'm consistently advocating on this channel, and that is the ancient board game referred to as chess. Because chess is an ancient intellectual boxing match, and that its genesis can be found to stretch back as far back into the past, something like 60 to 70,000 years ago. And the principles of self-evolution is embedded into its makeup. So peep game and strap on your deep diving scuba gear, because it's about to get extremely deep. The secret to one's self-evolution, which by the way is a mind over circumstances kind of success system, but the secret that Nikola Tesla alluded to in that quote I just shared with you, where he emphasized the importance of understanding vibration and frequency. So zero in your undivided attention on this image, showcasing this formula. You see the rhythm value of notes highlighting the evolution or progression of how rhythm plays out within music composition. But when it comes to music composition, notes are represented by certain quantities and magnitudes. So this first note on this image, starting from the left, is what you would call the quarter note. Next in line is the 8th note, then the 16th note. Following that is the 32nd note, and finally the 64th note. Now, once again, peep game. As for the ancient board game called chess, the chessboard, it has 64 squares that makes up its composition. If you divide it by 2, you get 32 squares. And if you continue that division, you get 16 squares, then 8, then 4. And finally, you would get to the magnitude of 2, which represents a game with 2 shades of squares, the lighter shade and the darker shade, which is played by 2 people, indicating that each player must remain on their square at all times. Going back to that binary choice that I started at the beginning of this episode, where I said you either remain in a state of dread or you evolve. Now, how does this progression and evolutional process affect your mental capacity, which is directly related to your self-evolution, which by the way, like I said, is a mind over circumstance kind of success system. In light of what I just got through explaining, the reason for all of this is to show you how evolution or progression has directly correlation to how rhythm and vibration maneuvers and operates. Now, as to how all of this plays out in terms of your self-evolution, which is a mind over circumstances kind of success system, just imagine for a moment and go along with this analogy I'm about to use. Check out this frequency and wave I'm currently showing at this moment. Let's say this represents your mind or your mental capacity. This is going to explain why so many individuals are wide open to be misused and abused by the dark side of the force, which is shysteism, and why so many individuals is restricted on using and implementing any of this street philosophy referred to as the concept called game. Getting back to my analogy, just imagine that this frequency and waves represents your mind or your mental capacity. You see, your thoughts, which is fueled by your sensations, is consistently riled up because of what transpires upon this chessboard we call life. And when all of this is riled up, it will exhibit properties like a wave. To comprehend what I'm proposing, think of a vibrating cord or strand. For a strand to vibrate, it must be secured at both ends. All vibrations within a cord or strand will require both ends to have boundaries that is well secured, as this new image I'm currently showing clearly is demonstrating. In conducting scientific research in a lot of universities when it comes to physics, this is called boundary conditions. Like I have said many times before, this philosophy referred to as the concept called game is not a speculative sport. It's all about observing observable facts. So how do this apply to an individual being wide open to be misused and abused by the dark side of the force, and why this makes so many individuals restricted on using and implementing any of the street philosophy referred to as the concept called game? Because in order to take part in your own self-evolution, which now we getting ready to get into the nitty-gritty of how the application of this analogy points to your overall success. But this analogy as it pertains to these boundaries, which is a necessity by the way, but if that strand which represents your mental capacity is going to have any vibration or flow to it, then there must be some kind of boundaries. And these boundaries from a pragmatic point of view is equivalent to the street code, which acts as a catalyst upon your game, allowing you the ability to flow and have the dexterity in your mental capabilities. And this street code has 4 major components making up its composition. Check out this new image I'm now showing. Here's the thing. This street code, it encapsulates one doing their duty without being supervised, to hold, maintain, and to keep. Yeah, I'm talking about some real grown folk shit right here. But each component of this street code has many chapters that stretches into many different aspects of a practitioner's life. So a brief overview starting with the first code on this image, which is to know thyself, is the attainment of individual power. Without individual power, one cannot be influential in attaining their intended outcome. As to know, at the very least, requires observational skills, coordination abilities, and along with an eye for scrutinizing, which all of this requires a intuitive and a razor-sharp intellect. The next code in line is to will, which must be dynamic, this ability to be front-sight focused. Next is to dare, which speaks to one's ability to be courageous and not chicken-hearted. And last but definitely not least, to be silent, which speaks to the ability of a practitioner to navigate when it's best to be unforthcoming, where the average individual will be prone to speak, and to navigate when it's time to talk, whereas the typical and average individual would freeze up and be silent. So to double down and to be certain that you are catching all of this, boundaries, in this case the street code, creates the vibration that becomes the catalyst whereby you become a force to be reckoned with, which depends on the strength of your head and your spine. Let me explain. Your ability to follow through, to dare, which is one of the codes I just got through explaining, which also symbolizes your spine, but your follow through will determine your ability to focus, which is to will, another code which symbolizes your head. But one's ability to focus will keep one's head pointed in the right direction and one's eyes on the prize, so to speak. Focus is the rudder that steers your thoughts and guides your action towards turning your vision into reality upon this chessboard we call life. As the head is connected to the spine, being front sight focused is connected to self-discipline, which is related to the street code to dare. So being front sight focused would give you the self-discipline you need to follow through. Similarly, if you are self-disciplined, you will find it easy to focus, avoid distractions, and work on what needs to be done. Like the spine, self-discipline keeps the body vertical and sturdy so that you won't fall into stagnation and a feeling of dread. In the final analysis, one who chooses to participate in their own self-evolution attains the right and the capacity to move from being reckless to being regal. But the upgrading on one's game will always begin with a practitioner exhibiting restlessness, for this truly shows discontent, and discontent is the spark that brings about progression and evolution. Show me a thoroughly satisfied practitioner of this craft, and I will show you a failure. Now that's checkmate. Thanks for watching. I will definitely catch you on the next episode.